The internet is reeling tonight after Brat allegedly cracked open a story the Braxton family never wanted revisited, and fans are calling it one of the most heartbreaking revelations to ever hit Black Hollywood. This wasn't shade. This wasn't gossip. This was raw, uncomfortable truth, wrapped in grief, silence, and a legacy that suddenly looks a lot darker under the light. According to what's spreading right now, Brat didn't just speak, she unloaded. And at the center of it all was Traci Braxton, the sister fans loved, the voice that always felt pushed to the side. The one who smiled through disappointment while the spotlight stayed elsewhere. And if the claims are even close to true, Traci wasn't just overlooked, she was allegedly sacrificed. Sacrificed for branding. Sacrificed for hierarchy. Sacrificed so the machine could keep moving forward. Fans say Brat's words reframed everything from Tracy's pain on reality TV to her constant fight for validation. Suddenly, old clips feel cruel instead of entertaining. Old jokes feel heavy. Old arguments feel strategic. And one chilling line attributed to Brat has the internet frozen. Everybody can't win when fame is the priority. Social media erupted instantly. People are revisiting moments they once ignored. Comment sections are flooded with regret, guilt, and rage. And the most painful question of all is being asked out loud. Did Tracy suffer in silence so the family brand could survive? Because if this story is true, then the Braxton empire wasn't built on unity alone, it was built on choosing who mattered most. And once you hear what Brat allegedly revealed next, you'll never look at that family the same way again. When Brat allegedly opened her mouth about the Braxton family, insiders say the room didn't react with shock. At first, it reacted with silence. The kind of silence that comes when something painfully familiar is finally said out loud. Because, according to the narrative now spreading, this wasn't a sudden accusation or a random take. It was something people around the industry had felt for years, but never dared to articulate. That Traci Braxton was always the cost of the family's ascent. Sources claim Brat didn't frame it as cruelty. She framed it as calculation. Not malicious in the moment, but cumulative over time. Decisions made in boardrooms, living rooms, and behind closed doors that consistently placed one sister at the center and another permanently on the margins. And the most devastating part, according to whispers, is that Traci allegedly knew it. Fans are now revisiting Tracy's earliest appearances with new eyes, the hopeful energy, the eagerness to belong, the way she always seemed to be auditioning for space in her own family. What once looked like insecurity now feels like survival. According to the rumor mill, Tracy wasn't fighting for fame, she was fighting for relevance inside a hierarchy that had already been decided. Brat's alleged comments reframed the narrative sharply. This wasn't about talent alone. It was about utility. Who fit the image? Who advanced the brand? Who brought leverage? And who, unfortunately, complicated the story. In that framing, Tracy's role was never fully protected, it was tolerated. Insiders claim that early on, Tracy was positioned as expendable, not in words, but in opportunity. While others were pushed forward, Tracy was asked to wait, to be patient, to understand timing, to accept that her moment would come later. But later, according to this narrative, never arrived because later was always reserved for someone else. What makes this alleged revelation so painful is the emotional labor Tracy continued to perform despite that reality. She showed up, she supported, she defended, she laughed at jokes that cut a little too close, and she carried disappointment in a way that kept the peace not because she didn't feel it, but because she didn't want to be seen as difficult. Fans now see that pattern everywhere. In family arguments that always ended with Tracy apologizing, in confessionals where her feelings were minimized, in moments where her wins were celebrated quietly while others' successes were amplified loudly. According to Brat's alleged account, this imbalance wasn't accidental, it was reinforced. Over time, everyone learned their place, and Tracy's place was to absorb friction so the structure stayed intact. That's what people mean when they say sacrifice. Not blood or betrayal, but positioning someone where they're expected to endure more for the greater good. The most chilling rumor to surface is that Traci's emotional pain was often reframed as jealousy. That when she spoke up, it wasn't treated as feedback, it was treated as insecurity. And once someone is labeled insecure, their concerns become easy to dismiss. That label, insiders say, followed Tracy for years and shaped how seriously she was taken. Brat allegedly pointed out something fans are only now reckoning with: how often Tracy's vulnerability became entertainment. Reality TV captured her frustration, her tears, her outbursts, but rarely resolved them. Pain was packaged, conflict was edited, and viewers were trained to see Tracy as the problem instead of asking why she was always hurting. That's where power enters the conversation. Because power decides whose pain is inconvenient and whose is understandable. Power decides whose anger is justified and whose is too much. And according to the narrative spreading now, Tracy rarely had power even inside her own family. Fans are struggling with this realization. Many admit they laughed at moments that now feel cruel, that they sided with louder voices without questioning why Traci always seemed to be the one asking for permission to exist. The guilt is palpable in comment sections filled with people saying they see it now. The most devastating claim attributed to Brat is that Tracy internalized this dynamic, that she began to believe her struggles were personal failures instead of systemic sidelining, that she blamed herself for not fitting into a machine that was never designed for her in the first place. If true, that reframes everything. It means Tracy didn't just lose opportunities, she lost confidence, belonging, and the safety of feeling chosen. And when someone spends years trying to earn love that should be automatic, it leaves scars that don't show up on camera. According to whispers, Tracy's later attempts to assert herself weren't power grabs, they were survival instincts. A last attempt to claim space before being written out entirely. But by then, the roles were fixed. The family brand was established, and challenging it felt like betrayal rather than self-preservation. That's the tragedy at the heart of this story. Because sacrifice isn't always demanded loudly. Sometimes it's normalized so completely that the person making it doesn't realize they're bleeding until they're exhausted. And exhaustion, insiders say, became Tracy's constant companion. As this chapter of the narrative spreads, fans are left grappling with uncomfortable questions. Was Traci ever given a fair shot? Or was she always meant to be the emotional buffer so others could thrive? Did the family protect the brand at the expense of one of its own? There are no easy answers, only patterns. Patterns of who speaks and who listens. Patterns of who is centered and who is corrected. Patterns of whose pain becomes a storyline and whose becomes an inconvenience. And as Brat's alleged comments continue to ripple, one thing is becoming harder to deny. Traci's story looks very different when you stop asking why she was upset and start asking why she had to be. This is where the first layer of the illusion cracks. Because once you see sacrifice not as coincidence but as structure, the entire legacy starts to look different. As the alleged revelation continued to spread, the conversation took a darker, more uncomfortable turn, because once people accepted the idea that Traci Braxton may have been sidelined, the next question became unavoidable. Who benefited from her silence? And that's where this story stopped feeling like hindsight and started feeling like a system. According to whispers attributed to Brat, the Braxton family didn't wake up one day and decide Tracy would be the odd one out. It happened gradually, through choices that always seemed practical in the moment. One sister fit the industry mold better. One voice sold more records. One personality tested stronger on camera. And every time a decision had to be made, Tracy was the one asked to understand. Just be patient. Your time will come. This isn't personal. Fans now recognize those phrases for what they often are: soft denials dressed up as encouragement. Insiders claim that early on, Traci was positioned as the emotional glue rather than the focal point, the peacemaker, the one expected to absorb tension so others could shine. That role, while praised publicly, came with an unspoken cost: invisibility. Because glue doesn't get credit, it just holds things together until it dries out. Brat's alleged commentary reportedly emphasized how often Tracy was told to be grateful just to be included. Gratitude became a requirement, not a response. And once gratitude is mandatory, resentment has nowhere to go but inward. That internalization, sources say, is what made Tracy's pain so easy to overlook even by those closest to her. Fans are now revisiting moments where Tracy's frustration was dismissed as moodiness or envy, arguments where she was told to let it go, confessionals where her feelings were overshadowed by others' achievements. The pattern is impossible to ignore once you start looking for it. According to the narrative circulating, Tracy wasn't excluded from everything. She was included just enough to keep her invested, enough hope to stay, enough proximity to believe change was possible. That's the most dangerous position of all, because it keeps someone emotionally tethered without ever fully empowering them. What made this dynamic especially painful, according to insiders, was how public perception reinforced it. Fans absorbed the edit. Viewers adopted the hierarchy without questioning it. Tracy's reactions became punchlines instead of warnings. And reality TV did what it often does best. It flattened complexity into entertainment. Brat allegedly pointed out that when Tracy finally pushed back, it was framed as disruption, as negativity, as someone rocking the boat that everyone else wanted to keep sailing. And once someone is labeled difficult, their concerns stop being heard on their merits. This is where power becomes central. Because power decides who gets grace and who gets correction, who is allowed to be flawed and who must be grateful. And according to the story now being told, Traci rarely had the benefit of grace, not because she didn't deserve it, but because the system didn't need her to have it. Fans are now grappling with the idea that Tracy's emotional breakdowns weren't instability, they were signals. Signals that something wasn't working. Signals that the cost of maintaining the family's public image was being paid privately by one person. The most haunting claim attributed to Brat is that Traci's loyalty was mistaken for consent. That because she stayed, supported, and showed up, it was assumed she was fine. But staying doesn't always mean agreement. Sometimes it just means endurance. And endurance, when unrecognized, becomes erosion. According to whispers, Traci often downplayed her own dreams to avoid being seen as competitive. She made herself smaller to preserve harmony. And while that choice may have kept the peace temporarily, it slowly erased her sense of worth. That erasure, fans now realize, is visible in hindsight in the way she questioned herself, apologized quickly, and doubted her right to be upset. The internet reaction to this framing has been intense and emotional. Many fans are expressing regret for not seeing it sooner. Others are questioning the ethics of reality television that profits from unresolved pain. The comments are filled with variations of the same realization. We were watching someone hurt, and calling it drama. As this phase of the narrative unfolded, the conversation expanded beyond the Braxtons themselves. It became about families everywhere, about how often one person is asked to sacrifice so the group can thrive, about how success doesn't always distribute evenly and how those left behind are expected to be thankful anyway. Brat's alleged role in this moment isn't as an accuser, but as a mirror. Someone close enough to the culture to recognize the pattern, and brave enough to say it out loud. Whether her words are fully accurate or not, they've forced a reckoning fans weren't ready for. The most painful part of this chapter is the realization that recognition came late. That Tracy's struggle is being re-examined now that she's no longer here to explain it herself. That empathy arrived after endurance ended. And that truth, even speculative, sits heavy with everyone watching. As this section closes, one thing becomes clear. This isn't about assigning villains. It's about understanding how systems, families, brands, industries decide who is essential and who is expendable. And once that question is asked, there's no going back to the old narrative. Because if Traci was sacrificed for the greater good, then the greater good comes with a cost that can't be ignored anymore. And the next chapter forces an even harder question into the open. What does accountability look like when the person who paid the price isn't here to receive it? By the time the final layer of this story settled in, the conversation had shifted from outrage to reflection, and that's when it became the hardest to ignore. Because once fans accepted the possibility that Traci Braxton may have been sidelined for the sake of a larger family narrative, the focus turned inward, not just toward the Braxtons, but toward the uncomfortable truth about how fame, power, and proximity quietly decide who gets protected and who gets pressured to endure. According to the ongoing whispers attributed to Brat's alleged revelations, the greatest injustice wasn't that Tracy lacked talent or opportunity, it was that her value was measured primarily by how well she fit rather than how deeply she mattered. In families that turn into brands, fit becomes currency. And when someone doesn't fit cleanly into the story being sold, their role gets reduced, reframed, or quietly absorbed by the margins. Insiders claim this is where Tracy's story becomes tragic rather than dramatic, because tragedy isn't loud. It's repetitive. It's being told to wait over and over again until waiting becomes your identity. And according to the narrative now circulating, Traci waited faithfully not just for recognition, but for fairness. For someone to say, "Your voice matters as much as anyone else's." That moment, fans fear, never truly came. As this realization spread, something unexpected happened online. The tone changed, less arguing, more grief. Fans began sharing clips of Tracy that once felt comedic or chaotic, and now felt heartbreaking. Moments where she laughed through disappointment. Moments where she defended her sisters even when she felt excluded. Moments where she tried to claim space and was gently, sometimes not so gently, pushed back. The rewatch hurt. And that pain led to a deeper question. How many times do families confuse peace with silence? How often is one person expected to absorb discomfort so everyone else can move forward unbothered? According to speculation, Traci was that person. Brat's alleged framing that Traci was sacrificed not through cruelty but through convenience resonated deeply because it mirrors how power often works. No villain twirling a mustache. Just repeated choices that benefit the same people over and over while someone else is asked to be strong. Strength, in this context, became a cage. Fans now argue that Tracy's emotional volatility wasn't instability. It was the natural response of someone who felt unseen in spaces where she should have felt safest. And once that lens is applied, her entire arc looks different. Not messy, not dramatic, but human. The most painful part of this chapter is the timing. Because this reckoning is happening after Tracy is gone. After the chance for real-time acknowledgement. After the possibility of public correction. Accountability now feels symbolic rather than restorative. And that's what leaves such a hollow ache in the conversation. According to the rumor mill, even within the family, there's an unspoken awareness that something was missed. That moments passed without repair. That love existed, but listening fell short. And when love isn't paired with listening, it doesn't land the way it should. Fans are torn between compassion and criticism. Some argue that families are complicated, that no one gets it right all the time. Others insist that complexity doesn't excuse harm, especially when patterns repeat. The debate isn't about perfection, it's about responsibility. The Braxton legacy now sits at a crossroads in public perception. On one hand, it represents resilience, talent, and cultural impact. On the other, it's being re-examined as a cautionary tale about what happens when success becomes centralized and empathy becomes unevenly distributed. Both can be true, and that duality is what makes this moment so heavy. According to whispers, Brat didn't intend to tear anything down. Her alleged comments weren't about canceling anyone, they were about naming a cost that had gone unspoken for too long. Naming the idea that someone's pain was treated as collateral damage instead of a call to recalibrate. And naming something is powerful, because once it's named, it can't be unseen. As this story reaches its current pause, the internet isn't demanding punishment, it's demanding remembrance. That Traci Braxton be remembered not as the difficult sister or the forgotten one, but as a woman who carried disappointment with grace until it became too heavy to hold quietly. People are asking different questions now. What does it mean to support someone without centering yourself? How do families course correct when imbalance becomes tradition? And how many traces exist in families everywhere, loving deeply, sacrificing often, and being told that their hurt is the price of belonging? This story doesn't end with answers. It ends with responsibility. Responsibility to revisit old narratives with honesty. Responsibility to acknowledge pain even when it complicates legacy. Responsibility to understand that success built on silence eventually demands a reckoning. Tracy's voice may no longer be here to shape that reckoning herself, but the conversation she unintentionally sparked refuses to fade. And maybe that's the legacy that matters most now. Not fame, not power, but the reminder that no one should have to disappear for others to shine. Because when one person is asked to carry the weight of everyone else's comfort, the cost doesn't vanish. It just waits to be recognized. If you've made it this far, it's because this story didn't feel like tea. It felt like a reckoning. This wasn't about dragging a family or rewriting history for clicks. It was about finally seeing what was always there and asking ourselves why it took so long to notice. Stories like this don't trend because they're loud, they trend because they're true to something deeper. And that's exactly why you can't disengage now. Hit that like button immediately so this conversation doesn't get buried, because algorithms move fast, but accountability moves slower. Drop a comment and share what this made you reflect on, not just about the Braxtons, but about families, favoritism, sacrifice, and the people who are always told to be strong while quietly breaking. Your perspective adds weight to this discussion, and silence is how these patterns keep repeating. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and turn notifications on. Because stories like this don't end when the video does. They resurface in interviews, in old clips, in moments people can't edit away anymore. When more context comes out, when someone finally responds, or when another voice speaks up, you'll want to be here as it happens, not catching up after the narrative has already been rewritten. This isn't just content. It's memory. It's accountability. And missing what comes next might mean missing the moment the truth finally lands where it always should have.